Alright, what is up? I wanted to do a commentary talking about sort of the normalization of bias and also partisanship. I I think I'm just so like, as somebody who I try to be impartial, right? Not to say that I don't have any sort of bias, right? I think everybody does. I think that's obvious. It's natural, but I think the ability to try and set aside bias is something that is really lacking with so many people now. It's kind of startling, or just like sort of the unwillingness to even try to be impartial. Um, it's just a little weird. It's not even weird. I think it's a lot of it is cognitive dissonance, and you know, I think for a lot of people, for whatever reason, it makes them super uncomfortable to do so. Um, but at least regarding like American politics as a whole, um, as of late, I've just been kind of appalled at watching like these sort of inner squabbles, right, on the left and the right. I think it's in a way it's kind of hilarious, but it's also really fucking sad. Um, that you know, even within the so-called two-party system, right, which you know obviously is the case. You know, it's just like this elitism and this zealotry, right? This sort of you have to follow what the party, you know, what the party platform is all of the time, or else you essentially get booted out. And you know, the left has done this for a long time, but I think the right is also now doing it quite substantially. Um, it's just bizarre to me. Like you can have two people, right, that agree on 99% of things, and yet the 1% is for them still enough that they'll be openly hostile towards each other. It's bizarre. You know, obviously, I don't really believe in being openly hostile in general. At least not anymore. That's something I used to struggle with. I used to take shit too personal. I used to take shit too literally. I used to try and understand stuff that just was completely illogical. Um, and I think that kind of drove me crazy in a way. But um, but it's just the amount of stuff I see, right, where people will justify the most heinous, bizarre shit. People will justify fraud. People will justify foreign interests controlling the United States government. People will justify all kinds of shit, all kinds of terrible shit, right? As long as the people doing it are people they agree with, basically, or they're involved in some way, right? And it's just it's so weird to me because you see this criticism all the time, right? And both political parties do this. They'll criticize the opposite political party for certain things, but then they often do the exact same shit. And it's so fucking weird because you'll literally see constant 180s on policy, constant 180s when it comes to like viewpoints on different things, and also, I mean, you'll have one party that's will advocate for something, right? And the opposite party will oppose it, of course, right? Because that's how it is on purpose, right? Gridlock, partisanship, you know, all that shit. Intentional gridlock is more what I mean. But you'll see all that shit constantly, right? But as soon as the other party has some sort of control, right? They'll do the exact thing they were criticizing previously. This happens constantly, and it's bizarre. And it makes it so difficult, especially if you're somebody that follows any of this shit, or is especially if you're not a team sport type person, where you're like, oh, you know, you don't treat politics like a fucking sporting event, you know, where it's my team versus their team. If you don't treat it that way, it's extremely hard to even have any inkling as to who you should vote for, or who you should follow, or whatever, because there's no consistency with fucking anything. It's all pandering, it's all fucking false promises, it's all just trying to create, like, false popularity, essentially, or popularity based on an imaginary platform, is what I would say, or a platform that sounds good on paper, right? But then once elected, they're not going to follow that, right? And I mean, this is like a very general thing as well. Like, this isn't specific to one person or one party, or it's constant. It is constant. I could definitely bring some examples into account, and I will. So, I think as of late, one example I would pull is the fact that it seems like parts of the Republican Party have become completely okay with Israel, you know, lobbying within the United States government now, for whatever reason, even though maybe a year and a half ago, you know, they were talking about how that's a huge issue and needs to be dealt with. Yeah, I don't understand it, if I'm going to be completely honest. In terms of the left, like, there's just so much stuff. Like, it's almost hard to come up with an example, because I'd be here all day. In terms of how hypocritical they are. I mean, there's so many policies, right? I guess one thing I would say is you keep seeing, you know, the party constantly says, we're against political violence, but then, you know, the rhetoric continues, the violent rhetoric, the rhetoric basically trying to incite violence continues, you know, constant assassination attempts, constant violence towards political opponents, etc., etc., and it feels like at this point that's been normalized, and for whatever reason, nothing is ever done about it. And again, it's just bizarre to me. And political violence, by the way, is something that I, again, see, like, the sort of the same mentality where it's bad if it happens to me, but it's fine if it happens to somebody I don't like or don't agree with, right? For whatever reason, we continually see this with so many different things. We see it with fraud is a big one. Foreign intervention, you know, lobbying, insider trading, basically corruption in general. A lot of corruption in general is like that, in that you have all these politicians on both sides of the aisle that say, we're against corruption, but then as soon as, you know, they benefit from it, then all of a sudden it's, oh, it's fine as long as people I like are benefiting, or people that I think should benefit from it. And it's just, it's like, why has this been, like, almost normalized now? It just seems like the standard sort of thing. Like, you have partisanship for stuff that there's not really even a debate. Like, why should it even be a debate? In the United States, why should foreign interests be a debate? I think it's objective that other countries should not dictate how the United States government runs themselves, right? I think that's inherent. When it comes to, like, something like fraud, I think that's inherently a bad thing. I think it ruins tons of people's lives. Of course, it benefits the people that you know, engage in it, but think of how many people would get crushed by that shit because of it. Because it's essentially stealing. I mean, it is stealing. It is. There's no, you can't, you know, you can't soften the blow. I see people try to sugarcoat it or try to find some way to label it that makes it not seem as bad as it is, but in essence, it is kind of economic murder in that you're ruining people's lives for your own gain, right? So the fact that there's people even, like, opposing that or attempting... Now, again, it's because of the partisanship. It's because of the whole party thing, right? It's partially because of bias. But in general, I think anything that's fucking Americans over should be a unifying thing, right? But for some reason it isn't. I don't know why. It's bizarre to me. You could have something that is negatively affecting everybody, and somehow nobody would agree. You know, people would disagree on it, right? It's just strange. I can't explain it. I don't know if it's, like, fucking... I don't know. Munchausen Syndrome? Fucking... It's just bizarre, to say the least. And, unfortunately, as somebody that I try to... actually be critical of everything. I actually try to have standards. I get punished constantly by that, right? I constantly piss people off because I'm not biased, or I try not to be. And that makes people mad. Because they're like, why don't you play favorites? Why aren't you, you know... People get angry when you're an independent thinker, big time. That I think more than anything pisses people off now, which is bizarre. I need to stop saying that, but it truly is. Take a shot every time I say bizarre, but that's just how it is. And again, this kind of reinforces why third party needs to be more relevant. In politics, and why we need inherently more competition in general. When it comes to business, when it comes to politics, we need more competition where it matters. We have a lot of competition where it doesn't matter, or in cases where it's not even beneficial to have competition. We push competition when it comes to meaningless shit, but when it actually comes to stuff that does affect society, we don't give a fuck. It's just bizarre. There I am with that word again. It's just strange. I'm gonna say strange, alright? We're gonna change it up. That's the autism kicking in, dude. That's the autism kicking in. 100%. And of course I'm biased. I naturally have sympathies to certain people or, you know, ideals. Of course. Who doesn't? But I'm just kind of tired of this, and you know what? I think a lot of it is fucking political theater, and it's not even genuine. I think there's a lot of fake fucking partisanship, or fake, or bias, where people know they're being biased, and they just don't care. They don't care. There's no integrity in that sense. And there's just this complete unwillingness to do so. Obviously, there's people that are you know, completely lack self-awareness, right? And they're not able to even realize when they're being hyper-biased. But I'm not saying you can't have opinions. That's completely... Obviously, that's fine. But I'm saying you have to me, before you form any sort of opinion on something, you have to try and look at it from the lens of, I want actual information. I don't want some sort of agenda or some sort of narrative being pushed. I want to know actual information, regardless of who it benefits. or what looks good, or you know, what narrative, right? It tilts the shit out of me when I see people, every time something happens, everybody likes to jump to some sort of, you know, political narrative or something that, you know, it's gonna make me look good if this is the case. You know, hopefully this is the case. You know, you get tragedies that happen and people are immediately jumping to, hopefully this gives me political brownie points. It makes me look good. Or makes my team look good. It's so fucking cringe. It's so hollow. And it's just so fucking bullshit. And it's just, you know, self-grandizing. It is kind of like narcissism incarnate in a way. But I just don't, ooh, sorry. But yeah, I just don't understand it. And I probably shouldn't even try to understand it, because, to be honest, I don't think I'm gonna learn anything that I don't already know. And I'm not some fence sitter. I know, like, the standard thing, right? When you criticize both parties, right? The standard response from you know, super partisan people is, oh, you're a fence sitter, oh, you have no opinions, oh, you can't take a stance, but just complete horseshit. I have plenty of stances on plenty of things. But because I don't inherently adhere to one or the other, people will say you're a fence sitter, right? Because I don't strictly align left or right. They'll say, oh, you're a fence sitter. You're not willing to take any sort of controversial opinion, or you know. Even though everything is controversial now, so I don't know how anyone can even say that. But I've had people on the internet say that to me. You're afraid of you're, you know, afraid of having a controversial opinion. But, you know, I think I've just hit my point where I don't really give a shit. When it comes to who I follow or who I resonate with. And the idea that if somebody... There's also this... In a way, it's kind of... It's just like this hypersensitivity thing, right? And it's also... I think it is kind of political correctness in a way. But it's this just hypersensitivity to any sort of criticism. And we see this all over the place, that any sort of criticism is immediately met with hostility, right? Even if it's the most constructive criticism you can give, or if it's, you know, there's nothing malicious or mean about it, or it's not, you know, it's not an ad hominem attack. If it's some sort of disagreement or whatever, immediately it's met with hostility, right? And it's, oh, you can't be a part of the group because you aren't lockstep with the group. And it's just like, there's all these political cultists everywhere, dude. What the hell? Oh god, what the heck? Somebody I was watching on Twitch hosted somebody else. But, like I said, where was I was talking about, like, cultists. Yeah, like, behavior. Yeah, it's like, again, there's like this... It's like a standard now that people just act like cultists. It's so weird. And the thing is, I almost think people do it. I think some people do it inadvertently, but I also think it's, if for whatever reason... It's kind of like religion in that sense, although I don't think religion is as harmful as political cults are, but, you know, religious cults are pretty bad. I guess I shouldn't say that. But I'm saying with how politics is right now in a lot of the world, I almost think in some ways that's as toxic, if not more toxic, than religion can be. But, and I'm not somebody that I'm not the anti-religious type. I'm agnostic, but there's definitely downsides. And unfortunately, I think a lot of religious extremism, it kind of does drag the rest of it down. And it's the same way with politics, right? I think, unfortunately, the far left and far right kind of cause a lot of issues, even within their own side of the political spectrum. I think they constantly cause issues because of it. And in some cases, it's not necessarily that somebody's, like, straight far right when it comes to everything, but maybe on social issues, they're much more... They're very hyper-traditional, hyper-conservative. I've seen a lot of people like that now, where I wouldn't consider them inherently left or right, but they're definitely not centrist, because they don't have particularly logical or reasonable views. It's kind of just they're both extremes. You know, you got people like Nick Fuentes, you got people like Hassan Piker, although Hassan's very clearly far left. But Fuentes is a very good example of somebody who, I don't know what the hell he is. He's like hyper religious, you know, traditional conservative when it comes to social issues, but he's like a Stalin simp, and he's basically a socialist when it comes to economic stuff, which is really fucking weird. It's very, very strange in that sense. I'd say there isn't people like that, but he kind of takes it to both extremes at the same time, and it's very... It doesn't... There's not a lot of logic to it, right? And I get, like... I think there is a lot of hyperbole with a lot of stuff. I think people, especially in the modern day with social media, love being hyperbolic for clicks and attention. People love rage baiting on the internet. That's super common now. I think 75% of shit, that political shit that people say, is actively rage bait on purpose. It's trying to provoke some sort of response, which I think is pathetic and sad. Because basically you can't have a reasonable discussion with people in any sort of way. Which I don't know why I even expect that, but... I don't really expect it anymore, which is what I've learned to cope with, right? I used to, you know, be so disheartened by that. Now I just don't give a shit. I just expect it, right? But,
We have taken the advantage. We have lost control of a victory point.
you know, it's obviously being anonymous to an extent. Lets people kind of bring out the darkest shit in some way without really much repercussion, if any. Even in the case of where I mean, it's kind of sad that I feel like even now, especially now, people really are able to kind of get away with just about anything on the internet in terms of... I think in a lot of cases you can openly threaten people and nothing, basically very little will often happen or nothing, depending on where you do it. It's pretty sad. And I don't like being Mr. Speech Police, because generally... I think that's an extremely slippery slope, and, you know, I'm not going to be Mr. Hate Speech, oh, that's hate speech, you know, because that is very broad, and you could label that as anything, any sort of criticism, but I think making actual threats, I think that's a pretty easy spot where you could draw the line, and unfortunately, nowadays, there's very little, well, I think it's always been like that, but I think definitely with the political climate being, you know, increasingly toxic over time, it's just gotten worse to the point where it's pretty standard now. And it's kind of another thing that's just been normalized, where I think people almost just, instead of doing anything about it, they're just kind of accepting that that's how it is, instead of ever trying to address it. And I see this in government, too. Although the government loves accepting things that don't work. I mean, that's kind of their MO, but, you know.
The enemy has dropped to 300 points. The fight continues.
I think it's kind of... And I'm not doing a pity me type thing, but I think it's definitely, at least in the modern day, I actually think being a centrist is probably the roughest spot to be, simply because you draw ire from probably the two most partisan groups of people, and you often have people sort of gang up on you, right? I almost think the far left and the far right are kind of unified in hating the middle in a weird way. And if anything, I think the most moderate people piss them off, because I think in a lot of cases they expect extreme, drastic change in every sort of sense. And if it isn't extreme or drastic, they get very, very angry. And typically violent, because I'm going to be brutally honest, a lot of them just aren't intelligent enough to not be violent. Hence why we see this kind of shit from extremists so often. Because they haven't really developed the means to even to be rational consistently, if at all.
Our territory is in enemy hands. Proximity alarm near our victory point.
But yeah, and you know, obviously not all centrists are the same. You have centrists who are maybe more conservative when it comes to economics, more liberal when it comes to social issues, vice versa. I'd probably say I'm somebody that I'm probably slightly liberal when it comes to economic issues, probably slightly conservative on social stuff. But
enemy forces have captured a victory point. We are losing ground for the victory point.
I wouldn't say there's any, like, opinions that I have that I would say are, like, super uncommon. And it's not me trying to have the most popular opinion, but I just, again, think... In reality, I think the lack of success, or the lack of progress, hasn't been due to inherent policy. I think in a lot of cases it's been due to lack of execution, lack of... I think corruption's a big one. I think greed. I think, false ideals, or ideals that don't actually benefit people. There's this concept that we have to be more extreme, right? Because when problems get worse, you have to be extreme, right? But I think in reality, I actually think having an actual balance is more important. The issue is, you actually have to get shit done. If you actually change things... The other thing is, we have so many laws in place, right? There's so many laws that just don't get enforced, or they're not enforced, and people aren't held accountable. That's a huge problem with society as a whole, is a lack of accountability. I think in a lot of cases, it's not even inherently that there isn't laws in place, it's again that they're not followed. I think people think that policy needs to be more extreme, but I just think policy actually has to be followed and enforced, right? And I think progress actually has to be pushed for, instead of pushing for this fake bullshit status quo. That in reality, all it's doing is enriching the people already in power. That's all it is. That's all it is, right?
The territory sector has been claimed by the enemy.
And that's why I'm so sick of shit. You know, I'm so sick of the baby boomers, especially, still being in power, because they've just been the status quo. I mean, they are inherently the status quo. And this is how they've been for decades. And again, it's to accumulate as much wealth as possible. That was basically the end goal. And then they pulled the ladder up on everybody else. And I think that's objective. When you have a generation that currently, at this point in time, is only 20% of the population, because some have passed away, and yet they have half the wealth, that's kind of a red flag. Especially considering the youngest boomers now are in their 60s. So people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s are not even boomers, and yet the boomers have as much wealth as them. If not more, I would say, right? Because I know, you know, Gen Z doesn't have much wealth, but, you know, I would assume there is a little bit there. But if you take the Gen Z wealth away, Gen X and millennials probably don't have half. So the boomers probably have more wealth than the millennials and Gen X combined. That's kind of telling. But, and that's not me trying to be ageist or anything. You know, I'm not saying all boomers are bad people, of course not. But, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the people in power are very selfish, like I've said before. And they don't care who they have to crush or step on to get what they want. That's just how it is with a lot of that shit, right? Unfortunately, that type of position, I think, inherently attracts the sociopaths and narcissists. I think they're the ones that tend to, for whatever reason, enjoy it the most. Even though in reality it should be a duty thing, not a, oh, I love doing this. You know, it should be something that's temporary. Like, you know, I think most people agree on term limits, the vast majority. I think that's a pretty common sense thing. But for whatever reason, people will disagree with each other on it. Even if they agree, they'll find some way to disagree. I think that's another thing, is people intention will find some loophole or find some small detail to disagree with each other on, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, you know, then the hostility comes out. I've seen this before. I've had this happen myself at times, right? Or you can just have a small thing that you disagree on, even if you generally agree on the same idea, and for whatever reason that's like the end of the world. And there's just not really a good, there's not really a logical justification, at least in my mind. I don't know if there's some other justification that anybody has, but let's see, player mode, caster
Time
mode.
for liberation is at hand. French
Okay.
riflemen may be assigned.
But yeah, so
We have French infantry eager to put the boot to the Germans. Barracks is ready for use.
and I think I've said it before, but yeah, the only thing that the two parties can't agree on is that we can't have a third party. And nothing would make me happier in my lifetime, even if third party never wins. Just if there was a third party of people that were a little more open to actual discourse and weren't so hostile, and maybe in terms of ideals weren't so hostile to different viewpoints, and maybe we at least had the same values in terms of how we view life, even if politically we don't agree on everything. Nothing would make me happier to see third party make one of the two big parties lose. Nothing would make me happier than that, right? Like, ultimately. I think the way I kind of see the current political landscape is the Democrats are kind of the acceleration theory, where I think they are the party. If you want society to collapse faster and then to look to rebuild it, that's the party you vote for. If you want society to kind of, instead of collapsing very quickly, if you want society to just bleed or death by 1,000 cuts, that's the Republican Party. So it's like, either choose your death. Either get hard decapitated or get slowly cut and bled. That's kind of how it is. I'd say extremely painful and fast, or less painful but much longer. Kind of what do you prefer, right? That's how I would say I see it. And if there was at least something to hold them accountable, because right now, let's be honest, the only accountability ultimately is maybe some splinter cells within the parties, maybe certain people that don't inherently follow the cult in every way, and you know, it's
Riflemen are ready.
I don't know. And not to say every person that supports either political party is a cultist, right?
Supplies are cut off.
There are people that they do think for themselves. They have their own opinions. They're not, you know, they don't go inherently lockstep with the party or change their opinions purely based on what the party says that your opinion should be, right? They're not cultists. Maybe they're a supporter, but they're not a cultist. They do have some independent thought. Unfortunately, those people get crushed by the parties. Not allowed to have that, right? Why would you ever think for yourself? You're not allowed to do that. That's bad, right? You're not allowed to form your own opinion. You have our opinion or else. I mean, I think if I just had to pull two examples that I think stick out very bluntly right now. There's multiple people, right? But I'm just gonna talk about people like right now that I can think of off the top of my head. And there's some other people that maybe are a part of one of the parties, but have kind of been ostracized by the party in a sense, but maybe haven't been booted out, but are openly heavily criticized basically all the time, and often treated with hatred by their own by people that they actually agree with on a lot of things. I guess if I had to give two examples right now, I would say John Fetterman and Thomas Massey are two that stick out big time to me, as I think the Democrats really want Fetterman out of their party, and obviously Massey just got booted out of his seat in Kentucky, so and not to say these guys are perfect or I agree with them on everything, because I don't. And there is criticism I have of both of them, but it's frustrating that people can't sort of separate views from values. People don't really vote based on values anymore. It's kind of a case where people just vote pure, and like, obviously, you should vote also based on politics, right? But the fact that there's so many one-issue voters, there's so many people that I mean, you should vote for people that you think actually do share your values as well. I think it's a full package, right? It's not just one specific thing. I'm not saying people have to be the nicest all the time. Or that you have to only vote for angelic people, right? But I think I'm at the point now where it's like, I don't really give a shit. Like, I'm not gonna vote for Slime, you know? I don't care if Slime agrees with me on literally everything. I'm at the point now where it's just, it doesn't matter, right? Because, to me, right, I think people that don't have the same values as me, I don't trust them to do the job. I don't trust them to do the job. I don't trust them to uphold their promise. I don't trust them to do what they say they're going to do. And I don't trust them to put anybody above themselves. I don't. Because guess what? They don't hold the same values. They don't. They may claim they do. They may claim that, you know, and they may even hold the same opinions technically. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do anything, or that they care. Or care to even do. Or if their platform is even what they actually think. Because people love lying about their platform. That's super common too. Where people say one thing and then, you know, as soon as they get in office, they 180, or they don't follow through, or for whatever reason. And, you know, typically it's excuses. Sometimes it's valid, but a lot of the time it's you know, a lack of conviction. Or it's being petty, or for whatever reason. There's a lot of reasons. But, you know.
You have 3 command points available.
But what I would say I think at this point I'm pretty much out. Unless there's some like drastic shift in politics, I will probably be voting third party. And I know both parties will sit in, you know, you'll have people from both cults insult you, right? They'll say, "Oh, you're an idiot. You're throwing away your vote," and which is hilarious, right? Because you'll have, you know, for whatever reason, they'll give people a don't ever vote slack. They'll say, "Well, at least you're not voting for the wrong person." But if you vote third party, oh, how dare you? How dare you defy us? But again, vote for the person you want to vote for, right? Like this party before everything else is just so cringe. Yeah, it's just so cringe. It doesn't really help anything ultimately. But a lot of people don't care. They like being a part of their team. It makes them feel warm and fuzzy. Oh, yeah, I'm a part of my team. I have friends. Even if my friends are slime and, you know, I don't really like them as people, but, you know, we're on the same team, so it's great. I've always said I would rather lose playing, like lose a game with people I like playing with than win with people I think are fucking, are slime balls, genuinely. And maybe that doesn't apply one-to-one to politics as a whole, right? But, but yeah. I just don't think the whip is cracked hard enough on bad actors, and I don't think the whip is cracked hard enough, when it comes to bias and partisanship. I don't think enough people call that shit out. They just don't call it out. They really don't. And people just love to look the other way on so much stuff. It's kind of crazy. And I'm not saying, like, you can't be critical. Or that you can't have, you know, you can't take any side on anything. You can't be sympathetic to people. But, you know, when stuff is levied against people, maybe you should look into it, right? I think people want certain things to be true so bad that they will obviously toss out any information that refutes it. There's this unwillingness to, oh my god, what if I'm wrong on anything, you know? It's this fragility and this ego that has been pushed by social media, by the media itself. I call it the media industrial complex because that's what it is. But yeah, yeah, lack of humility is just startling at times, I would say. And just people are so hell-bent on being right more than anything. They have to be. They would rather be correct about something horrible than be wrong and the outcome is actually good. It's just weird. People would rather have terrible events happen if it means they look good or correct. Or what they are saying looks to be the case. That's when, you know, selfishness, ego, narcissism, that's what happens when they take hold. And I think, unfortunately, there's way more people than you think that are, you know, have these problems. And it's okay. I'm somebody, and I know that might be a take, but I think it's okay to be a narcissist. But I think you have to be at least a little self-aware that you have those tendencies or you have that problem. And I know for narcissists, it's hard for them to even think of that, right? But I think the lack of self-reflection is a plague, ultimately, on a lot of things in general. And I know I'm not the most eloquent when it comes to that. I don't exactly have a way with words. I'm not gonna pretend I do. I am not exactly charismatic. But I don't think it's some crazy concept that's, like, even impossible to do. Because I think even in the past, this wasn't as big of an issue. Now, it's always been the case. A lot of the stuff I'm bitching about has been the case for a long time. It isn't a new thing. A lot of the shit I'm bitching about has been the case for decades and decades. But I think it's gotten so poignant, especially in the last 10 years. And it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight. You think we would have hit some breaking point, but we haven't. And it's almost scary because it's almost worse because I almost want it to be over and done with at a certain point versus this sort of decaying husk. I'd almost rather have shit actually blow up so we can get it over with, because I know it's eventual. It's inevitable, I would say. Because again, there's this lack of compromise, this lack of awareness, so... And again, I think a lot of it is, again, you have a lot of social media sites that don't... They'll have terms of service, right? Like everything does. But they, for whatever reason, will not follow them. I don't think that helps anything. I think it causes people to see a lot of awful shit. And I think that twists people in a way that is really, really bad. I think it makes people think in absolutes. That's a huge problem. Absolutism is massive. And I think social media feeds that like crazy. Because you get these fringe, you know, extreme shit, extremists that sort of are so loud compared to everybody else, right? And a lot of these people honestly are straight fucking losers. They just sit there and do nothing but rage bait and incite, you know, anger, and that's all they do. That's their whole life. You know, I'll admit, I was in a dark place like 5 years ago. I really was. I was one of those people that was, maybe I wasn't inciting stuff, but I would debate people on the internet and get pissed off and get mad and insult people. I'd do that. It was stupid as fuck. There's no point, but also, it's like, who gives a shit, you know? I don't know why I was taking shit personal. It's just foolish. There's no good reason for it. And it isn't beneficial to anybody, especially not myself, because it tanked my fucking mental health so badly. It's probably the worst I've ever been in my life, and I'm 27. 2020 and 2021 were probably the two worst years of my life, if I had to be objectively honest. But... people need to think more. There's too much... Emotions make us human, but there's too much of it, right? People gotta set that shit aside for at least a little bit, you know? At least wait before you have your outrage, or at least find something that's worth getting outraged about, or, you know? Very basic stuff. I just think there's so many misconceptions with so many things, or people intentionally want to be misled, or maybe are just so gullible, or they just believe everything they see, or they don't question anything. Or they aren't willing to put in any effort, or they don't want to actually try and confirm what they are seeing or what they think. And there's just such a lack of open-mindedness. There's so many people that claim they are, but they're not. It's so common, too. It's crazy the amount of people that claim they're open-minded, but in reality, it's maybe, what, 5% of people that claim they actually are? And it's not to say that, you know, there's been points in time where maybe I haven't been as open as I should. Everybody is flawed. Right? And everybody maybe makes that mistake at some point, but there's some people that are just unwilling to ever ever do that, basically. And there's even cases where people know they're like that. They just refuse to ever change, right? Probably because they're encouraged to be that way, or because there's ultimately not... It's not, the impact isn't as negative as it probably should be. But just, I would encourage people to look at all of the stuff that, all the common sense stuff that, you know, both political parties often oppose. Look at that type of stuff, regardless of what party it is or what your affiliation is. Just look at it. Don't take it so personally. Don't internalize it. It's not you. It's a political party. It you know, it's not, that's not you. That's not who you are. That's not your identity. That's not your personality. That's not your characteristics. You're completely separate from it, and I think if people just looked at shit, right? There's so much stuff, right? There's so much common ground that I think people could actually reach, but there's an unwillingness to do so, and two, there's like an unwillingness to accept how ridiculous, like there's people that like are unwilling to meet it, but also the fact that there's stuff that both political parties oppose that is just so common sense that the vast majority of people would agree with. The fact that we, you know, a good example, right, is daylight savings time. The vast majority of Americans don't want it. They're done with it. We still have it though, because, and we've seen this, right? And this has happened multiple times. One political party will get in power, they'll try and pass a bill to do something about it, right? And then often what will happen is either the establishment politicians, sometimes in the same party, or the other party will often shoot it down. They'll vote completely against it, and because we don't get enough, there's not enough votes, it never passes. Now, there is a lot of cases where bills are complete slop. Let's be honest. A lot of bills that are passed nowadays are slop. 75% of the bill won't help anybody, is just spending money. Essentially is a kid with a credit card, right? A kid with mom's credit card. But it's, you know, there's a lot of slop. But unfortunately, I think even though there is slop, you have to pass some things in order for anything to happen at all. And yeah, there's cases where things get significantly worse. But I'm at the point now where I would take, I don't know, I would take any sort of change over just decay. And maybe that's stupid. And I don't think all change is good change, of course. And I think often you don't... I've always believed that you don't change something unless there's a need. But in a lot of cases, there is a need, right? And I don't think that's some controversial view. That's not something that I think people would be like, oh, wow, I can't agree with that. And there's a lot of things that I think everybody could agree are a problem, but there's just an unwillingness to agree on it because, again, I don't want to align with them because they're bad. We're good, they're bad, right? Because there's this morality thing that's been tied completely to a political identity, right? Or, you know, people do it with you know, gender and identity politics as well. You know, labeling entire groups, or, you know, it's the same stuff. Judging everybody with one brush, right?
A victory point is under attack. We must act. Engineers here. A victory point is under enemy control now.
But it's, I guess it's kind of reality at this point. And there ain't no way, ain't no voting your way out of this. People, I think a lot of people can't, are coping when they think they can, but you can't. Even if each party got what they wanted, that still wouldn't really work out in the end, in my opinion. Because I think at their core they're flawed and they're selfish, so yeah. And ultimately with the swamp, basically everything absorbs it at some point, right? I think we've seen that outsiders will be absorbed. The swamp is like the blob. It absorbs all life that enters it. Even if you try to fight it, you will be absorbed because it's just easy to do that. That's the easy way, right? It is. Unfortunately, the way it is now with politics is that if you join politics and you don't either look the other way with all the scummy shit or you don't engage in it actively yourself, they will basically destroy your life, right? If you don't do what they want, they will destroy your life. They will actively try to do that. I think we've seen that with the weaponization of you know, a lot of government agencies in a lot of cases, both the left and the right. I think we've seen this with, you know, just the exploitation of power in that sense. I do think a lot of shit is hyperbolic and exaggeratory, but, you know, there's quite a lot of shit that isn't. And I think part of the reason that people like being partisan is because of the hyperbolic stuff. I think almost people they enjoy exaggerating things. I think it makes them feel good, so they do it.
Sector gone. We must take it back.
It, like, gives people power in some way. At least that's what it seems to be, or it seems to be the case, but... Man, I'm just rambling at this point, but it's nice to do stuff like commentaries like this sometimes, just to decompress, because sometimes when I see shit, it's like, man, I just have an urge to talk about it, because it just bugs me to hold it in. And I know with some people it's tough to talk about stuff sometimes because there's touchy shit, right? Which is fair. And that's fine.
Reports of enemy movement near our victory point.
But yeah, so.
The enemy have taken territory from us. They have taken our victory point.
Fortunately, like I said, I think it has to be somebody that's not a politician. It has to be somebody who's third party. It has to be somebody that's kind of built some sort of grassroots movement. But the issue is that's not really feasible in the current political climate because it's been created to intentionally be that way. A lot of shit is by design, right? I think people often wonder, why is something like this? Why is something like that? It's by design in a lot of cases. It's been intentionally made that way. You know, people like to say, oh, it's incompetence, and it's incompetence. And sure, there is an element of that, but a lot of it is by design. A lot of it is intent. A lot of it is malicious intent. I think people often downplay the intelligence of some of these people, or they underestimate them, but they know what they're doing a lot of the time. It's not an accident. These are, like, very twisted, manipulative people that, honestly, they get off to it. They get off to doing that stuff. And that's probably how they've always been to an extent. And I'm not saying it's every person, but I'm saying the vast majority of politicians are like that. But yeah. I guess I'm trying to think what other last points I have in this spot. I think this game ends in like 5 minutes. I think the US guy is probably gonna win, assuming about the army size. And the Shar is gonna be unkillable with the Panzer IIIs, pretty much. I don't think he even has tungsten. Even if he did, it's gonna be hard to crack that thing. So much armor. What else?
A fuel point is being seized by the enemy. Sector assigned. Mine lane is underway.
It's just kind of the path of least resistance. And I think the pressure is so strong from lobbies. It's so strong from the politicians. You know, it's one of those things where their power is so corruptible, and people just don't... I don't know if there's really anybody that has the resolve to really suffer through that. I don't know if there's somebody tough enough in the modern day to do that, to be honest. I really don't. Because I think just about everybody at a certain point will cave. I think the vast majority of people will in some capacity. Maybe that doesn't necessarily mean in them joining the corruption, but it often means that either they will look the other way because they just simply can't do anything about it, or due to, you know, being threatened, or, you know, it's a case where maybe they even feel pressured to engage in it to an extent, which is terrible, obviously. I'm not going to justify that. But it's kind of a popularity contest in that people probably feel like they have to fit in, otherwise they're never going to get any, you know, they're not going to be able to ever pass anything or help anybody, ultimately. But ultimately it doesn't matter, because even if you go along with the establishment, you're not going to help anybody, so it doesn't really matter in that sense. And then even if you get somebody that is able to do that, who says they don't just kill them or assassinate them or whatever, right?
Greyhound has been destroyed. Survival training course is complete.
There's a lot of forces that could be used, you know, to leverage against people that they view as dissenters, right? You know, the government as a whole views as dissenters. They have a lot of tools to leverage. And unfortunately, the only way to fight it would be probably with violence. I don't think it's something you're going to protest and stop, right? You know, look at, you know, a country like Iran. But I'm not really going to get into that entirely, but...
Mine lane complete.
I think it is one of those things where, unfortunately, violence is probably the only answer, and it's really not pretty. That's really, really bad. I hate saying that, because I really think it is the worst case scenario. It's the last thing you'd want to do, but, you know, a lot of these people don't have any shame, and they don't care about who they have to destroy, because they only care about themselves. They don't care about ridicule. They don't care about... you know, they don't care about being hated, because as long as they're doing well money-wise, as long as they get what they want, they don't give a shit. They could be the most hated person on the planet, but if they're set for life, it doesn't matter to them. They care about power more than anything else, basically. They prioritize that over everything. So, which is, I find really weird. I think it's pretty natural for humans to want to have other humans like them to some extent. I don't think people want to be, like, most normal people don't want to be hated by everybody. It's a very specific type of person that you know, doesn't care at all if they're widely hated. You kind of have to be an antisocial type, you know? Probably a deviant in that sense. But unfortunately, these are the only people that really want to be politicians, right? I think most normal people don't really want that that spotlight, or they don't want that responsibility in a sense, I guess. Because unfortunately, you know, even if you're a good politician and you do your job well, you're going to be held, you know, you're going to be scapegoated still because, you know, as a whole, politicians are inefficient, wasteful, corrupt, you know, basically, you know, all the above. So even if you do a good job, it doesn't really matter because the group as a whole is fucking useless. Um, so yeah.
Forward units report the Krauts are down to 250 points. Anti-tank crew killed in action.
But yeah, there's 2 Shars now. It's, that's cooked. That is cooked. Yeah, I think you have to get Stugs against the Shars. You need armor. P3s don't have enough armor. You have to go heavy into Stugs. Anyway, I think that's probably about all I've got. Maybe if I think of anything else while I upload this, I'll include it in the description. But I think that's probably all I've got for now. I gotta rest my voice. But anyway, thank y'all for listening to my rambling like a madman. Yeah. Got anything else to add? Feel free to leave a comment. If you want to shit talk me, go for it. I don't really let loose, whatever. Do what you got to do, I guess. Anyway, adios. I'll catch you on the next one. I think I'm gonna probably do a Left 4 Dead 2 campaign here, not too long from now. Do another expert realism run, but yeah, that's about all I got. So, adios. Bye bye.